I'm D-Mac from NBA Fantasy Bible, and of course, along with me is Kayla Fonte, and together we are Between Two Hoops. Kayla, Merry Christmas. How are you?
Merry Christmas to you too. I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing really well. It's great to be back. Had a couple of days off with family. Awesome to have some quality time with the family. So much going on. A lot of food, too much food. A lot of drinking, too much drinking. But good to be back into fantasy sports again.
It's nice to be back for sure.
Shall we get into it?
Let's do it.
All right. Let's start with our hot performers, guys, and our sell highs. None other than James Harden kicks us off tonight. So in the last 2 weeks, he's the sixth ranked 9-cat fantasy player, which is amazing, seeming the shaky start that he got off to in the start of the season. He's actually overall 12th for the season, which is also unbelievable. He's a first rounder, guys. So that's a lot of value for where he was being drafted just before the start of the season. So that's fantastic for those that were able to pick him up in drafts. And in terms of points, he's actually ranked 16th for the last 2 weeks, which is an uptick in terms of his overall ranking in points leagues as well.
Yeah, and
Thoughts on James Harden?
as you mentioned earlier, he had a rough start to the season, and going into the draft too, a lot of people who picked him knew those risks heading into that year. But he's really starting to pay off right now, and it's hopefully something that he can continue because we know how he could be a little bit streaky.
Yeah, absolutely. And it has helped that Kawhi's sat the last couple of games as well. Hopefully he returns soon, but James Harden's he's taken full advantage of that as well. So, yeah, looking at his stats there, just nice uptick in terms of his blocks as well, which, sometimes you do get from James Harden, but being able to provide 1.6 blocks per game over the last 2 weeks is definitely an increase on what we normally get from him. And look at those shooting splits as well. So close to 50%. And of course, he's ever reliable from the free throw line. But fantastic fortnight for him. And let's see if it can continue. Ja Morant. Now, he's a sell high in my opinion, just because we know his limitations in terms of category leagues, in terms of points leagues, and you'll see how he's ranked at the moment 13th. Last season, just because of the small sample size of 4 games so far this year since his return from suspension, he was 12th last year in points leagues as well. So that's not necessarily a sell high, but for category leagues, he's ranked 35th. So that's amazing. Last year, he was 93rd for the season. Of course, he has these limitations in terms of free throw percentage, turnovers for those that do worry about that, particularly in a 9-cat format as well. So I think it's a definite sell high opportunity for him. But you also look at those free throw percentages, 81.5, where he's typically been around the mid 70s at high volume as well. So definitely a sell high opportunity.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And I think a lot of people too were very surprised at how he really just hit the ground running, especially after not playing for such a long period of time. He was going through that conditioning and the practices and things like that, but he really just got off hot right at the start too. It's something that I think he will be able to continue, but like you said, he's had a couple of issues in the past, especially with that efficiency has been a big one for me. And I think he has a little bit more value in points leagues though over categories.
Yeah, 100%. And we've seen his minutes actually go up this season compared to last. And I guess there's just less help on the team this season. So he's had to really step up in terms of the amount of usage, the amount of minutes that he's playing as well. So when you look at it from a points perspective, maybe it's actually a buy low opportunity, but sell high for a category perspective for my liking as well. Next, Derek White. What a hot performer. He's just had a stellar season. He's in contention for an all-star berth as well, which is crazy for people that are calling him just a role player. But I think he's more than a role player. And it's been reflected in his on-court play, but as well as his fantasy output. And he's just been tremendous. The last 2 weeks as well. It's crazy to say because of just the amazing season he's had up to this point. But the last 2 weeks, he's actually improved on where he's been for the season. So he's actually been ranked 7th in terms of 9 category rankings over the last fortnight. Pretty crazy.
I know. I think it's really remarkable too, because I don't think anyone really expected this kind of production for him, especially with that really stacked starting lineup that the Celtics had. But he's really just finding ways to make an impact. Throughout the season, he's been really solid. But like you said, over the past 2 weeks, he's just taken his game to another level. And while it may not be sustainable, he's still going to give you those amazing fantasy numbers too that we've already seen.
Yeah, and as is the case with all these guys, just because we say it could be a sell high opportunity, doesn't mean you have to force a trade. And more often than not, trades won't happen your way as well. So if you do happen to still stick with him, you can't sell high. Just enjoy the ride, because I think you can continue it. Probably not in the first round type of value, but if he's 18th for the season in terms of categories, I think that's something that could be there and thereabouts come end of the season. In terms of points leagues, again, there's been a real uptick in the last fortnight. But yeah, he's sort of been in those mid rounds for points leagues. Next one, Dan Gafford. He's had a great year. Pretty slow start to the season. You know, a lot of his value comes from those traditional big man stats. So high field goal percentage, insane blocks. He's averaging 2.7 blocks across the last fortnight, which is awesome to get that sort of value out of a Washington player as well, when things were a little bit hot and cold, and still mainly cold for the Wizards. But he's held his own, and Daniel Gafford's looked tremendous.
Yeah, and I think some injuries early on in the season can also be to blame for that hot and cold streak. But in the end, he's a double threat. He any night he can give you double digit points and rebounds, which is very valuable. And even like you said, the 2.7 blocks is just insane. It's almost like Jaren Jackson Jr. numbers over there.
Yeah, and you look at those steals as well, 1.1 steals from a big man as well. It's something pretty rare, and to get that combination of steals and blocks from a big guy, plus the field goal percentage, he's not hurting your free throws. 78.6 for Dan Gafford is tremendous as well. So that's where you can see how he's had that uptick in terms of his ranking. He's a sell high just because we don't know what the Wizards will do come the rest of the season. Are they going to blow it all up? Does Dan Gafford get traded away? Does he get traded away to become a backup somewhere? And if that's the case, that really hurts his value. So I think now's the time that you can consider selling him high. But again, enjoy the ride while it lasts if you can't sell high. In a similar vein, Tyus Jones, just the last fortnight, he's been hot. People were calling for him to be dropped from some of their teams not that long ago. But now look at him. Past fortnight, he's been the 10th ranked 9-cat player, which is awesome. 56th for the season. So that's been a tremendous comeback for Tyus Jones.
Yeah, and I think it's just amazing how many categories that he contributes to as well. If you look at points, rebounds, threes, he could really just do it all, and he offers something for pretty much everything too. And like you said, it's a good thing to have him as a sell high right now because we really don't know what the Wizards are going to do, especially regarding their guards right now. I think it's very uncertain.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, in the last week and a half, Jordan Poole, my man, Jordan Poole, he's actually looked quite good.
Hmm.
But Tyus Jones has really taken the cake. He's just looked awesome. And I did have there next to his assist rate, just his low turnover rate. And he's always been a high assist to turnover guy, but it really has shone in the last couple of weeks. Now, in contrast, let's look at disappointments or buy low opportunities as well. Mikal Bridges, much has been talked about how he's dropped off in terms of his fantasy output. But yeah, he's been extremely disappointing, not just the last fortnight where you can see he's been the 323rd ranked player in category leagues, but 85th for the season. For those that were drafting him, and I did warn people, drafting him in the middle of the second round was always fraught with danger, and I did not advocate for that, but I didn't see this happening.
Yeah, a lot of people were very high on him heading into the season too, and I think it's overall just been really disappointing. He hasn't led the team the way that we expected to, and he hasn't had that impact as well. And I don't think that's something that's really going to change throughout the season. As we've seen, there's already been a lot of other Nets players who have stepped up, but no one's really standing out on that team.
Yeah, he was coming into this season as the alpha, but then you look at someone like a Cam Thomas, sort of unexpectedly came out of the blue and just started taking a lot of usage away from Mikal Bridges, and that has hurt him. And his famous efficiency from days of gone when he was at the Suns as well hasn't left him, but it hasn't been nearly as impressive as it was in previous years. Next one, Miles Bridges, namesake. They aren't brothers, but namesake. Miles Bridges has actually looked pretty disappointing over the last fortnight, and it's no coincidence that it's happened whilst LaMelo Ball has been sidelined as well. And so they're the guys. They're the awesome duo, and he has looked disappointing. He can't create his own shot, so he definitely needs a real elite point guard to help him out. He's looked a little bit better in the last couple, but he definitely needs LaMelo next to him.
Yeah, he dropped off after that really hot start to the season when he returned from his suspension. The promising thing though is that there are a few injuries on the Hornets besides LaMelo, so hopefully that means a bigger impact for him. But he really needs LaMelo to be able to thrive like he did before.
Absolutely. And we'll get to that later in the show, but Gordon Hayward has gone out. He'll probably be out for about a week. Brandon Miller is day to day at this stage. So, yeah, as you were alluding to, a little bit more minutes for Miles Bridges as well moving forward. But, yeah, a bit of a buy low opportunity. So, if you can throw out some trade offers for probably someone around that 80 mark to get someone who's for the season 42nd, I think that's going to be a win for you because I can see him improving once, like I said, once Ball returns to the lineup. Kevin Durant, you would not expect to see him in this lineup, in this list here of disappointments, but in the last fortnight, he's the 93rd category league player, which is unbelievable. He's actually dropped out of the first round in categories for the first time in probably the entire season. He's now 13th for the season, which is still awesome. And he's been relatively healthy, quite healthy this season, played the majority of the games, but it's just been a little bit of a drop off and not much. It doesn't take much for the guys at the top to really be a bit of a drop off in terms of their ranking, but he has slowed down in the last fortnight.
And it's a bit surprising too, especially with Bradley Beal out, and then you have Devin Booker as well, but he's one of the main stars on the team, so you always expect a little bit more out of him. And he's still giving you those good stats, as you said, but there's always that little bit more that he could do.
Yeah, and I watched the game the other day against Dallas, and he looked a little bit maligned. I know Grayson Allen got a little very hot in that third quarter, but yeah, Kevin Durant just didn't seem himself. And I'm not saying that he's injured, but he just didn't look like the guy, the go-to guy for the Suns alongside of Booker. But I expect that to return. So again, that's why he's on our buy low list. Jimmy Butler, he's perennially on our list. And that's been quite disappointing for those that did draft him, expecting to get per game numbers around that first round mark as per normal. Of course, we expect him to miss a few games throughout the season, just with a few niggles, just with precautionary days off as well. But yeah, in terms of his per game value, it's been quite disappointing.
Yeah, and the injuries have really just piled up for him too, so that hasn't really helped his case. And we've even talked about this a lot in the past, but he's also more of a playoff performer. And even I think you've mentioned this too, but in the second half of the season, that's when he tends to really just heat up. So we might have to wait a little bit more before we actually see that playoff Jimmy.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a few guys that have stepped up as well for Miami. They
Mhm.
haven't looked bad. And Jaime Hackers, he's looked really nice. And when needed, Duncan Robinson, Josh Richardson, all of these guys, these role players have just come in and they looked really nice when Jimmy Butler has either missed or have had quieter games as well. But yeah, his steal rate's really low this season. I think for the season, he's around that 1.0 mark, where perennially he's above 1.5, closer to 2 steals per game. And I guess that is one of the more variable categories. And again, less of an impact in points leagues, as you can see there. So still ranked 49th for the season in points leagues, 50th for the season in category leagues. But yeah, real drop off in the last fortnight for him. Steph, another one that we don't really expect to see on this list, but just high expectations just means that slight drop off means he is a bit of a buy low. In the last fortnight, 66th ranked category league player, which is pretty bizarre, and 19th for the season, which when we were drafting him around that 6 or 7 mark in drafts before the season started, I think 19th is a little bit disappointing.
Yeah, it's very surprising for him too. But I guess we all expected some changes to come with the addition of Chris Paul over the offseason. But even looking here, you can see some drop offs in his assist numbers and even rebounds too.
Yeah, and in the last fortnight, I've highlighted 3.6 free throw attempts per game, and that's down on his season average and down on what we've seen in the past as well. So a lot of his value does come from obviously threes, but that elite free throw percentage. But when he's not getting to the line as much, not sure why that is at this stage, but when he's not getting to the line as much, that does hurt his overall value. So again, throw out a lower offer and you may be able to get a potential first rounder back as well. But Steph Curry, it's going to be quite difficult to pry him off of a manager. Zion, again, we've talked about him a lot this season in terms of buy low opportunities. And maybe this is not a buy low. Maybe this is, and we need to analyze these trends. Maybe this is just who he is. In terms of category leagues, we've always known his limitations. He's a punt free throw guy. So even when you do punt that category, he still has not lived up to expectation.
Yeah, you know what? He's just a very complex case. And I'm even looking at your rankings here. And I was going to mention it earlier, but he's way more valuable in points leagues than he is in categories. Because I do have him in one of my leagues. And so far, he's been better than I expected. And that's mainly because he hasn't been injured for a long period of time yet, which I'm still crossing my fingers that that doesn't happen. But it's very hard because I have been trying to offload him too, but at the same time, I'm like, he's giving me decent value. It's just, yeah, it's very hard to explain its case.
Yeah, and we've seen a drop off in terms of points per game as well. He hasn't needed to really be that guy. There's a lot more options on that Pelicans team,
Mhm.
which is great for overall team chemistry, but disappointing for those that did draft Zion, thinking that they'd get close to 28 points per game out of him. But yeah, he's been at 20 points per game in the last 2 weeks, which, yeah, again, hasn't lived up to expectations. But there are buy lows. We'll quickly go through a few ads. I've got Andre Drummond at the top of the board there. Those that tuned in yesterday saw the demolition job that he did in Nikola Vucevic's absence. What did he get? 24 points, 25 rebounds, just an insane game. Amazing stream for those that brought him in. I brought him in one of my leagues and in a quite dominant position, particularly in rebounds right now. So that's a really, really nice ad. And I think with Nikola Vucevic, it's not clear how long he's going to be sidelined, but I would expect at least a week. So you have to retain Andre Drummond's services for that period of time because yeah, we knew of his skills and his talent in terms of fantasy back when he was at Detroit, and it's looking like he's able to do that in Chicago with not a great deal of backup center guys as well.
Yeah, it's good that he's finally getting that usage too, because I think this is the first time that Vucevic missed a game since like I want to say like a year or something. I was reading a stat, but it was something crazy like that. So he's definitely a player that you have to capitalize on right now. And in
Yeah.
addition to those points and rebounds, I was also looking at his stats. He gave you a couple of multi-category value too, even some assists. I think a couple steals. So that's even more amazing.
Yeah, in his heyday, he was always good at getting a few steals as well. He'd play the lane. He'd always get some hands in. Not a good defender, but it translated somehow into good statistics as well in terms of steals. Not the best blocks guys, but yesterday he was able to provide a couple of blocks as well, which definitely appreciated for those that brought him in. So I think he's probably the number one ad at this stage, just whilst Vucevic is sidelined. Now I've got a couple of three Warriors here. Brandon Podds, TJD, and Jonathan Kuminga. I think they should all be on rosters at this stage, whether that be points leagues or category leagues. They've looked really impressive, and I know there's been obviously Draymond Green out suspended, a little bit of a changing of the guard in terms of Andrew Wiggins, your boy Wiggins as well. So I think all three guys should be on rosters.
Yeah, and I think I just want to highlight Davis right now. Really unexpected, even when I was writing an article earlier this week on some ads. Like insane. I was looking at his stats. He gives you good value in all the primary categories. He can give you a couple of stocks here and there too as well. And I really hope he just carved out a spot for himself in the rotation because this is a really promising player.
Absolutely. I think Podziemski is probably the priority out of those three, but
Mm.
you wouldn't be disappointed if you had the other two either. I think they have to be rostered at this stage, and yeah, that's pretty much it for the Warriors. Grayson Allen, he had an awesome game, as I alluded to earlier. He had a great game against the Mavericks in the last one. But even whilst Bradley Beal's out, I think he needs to be rostered as well. To a lesser extent, I think Eric Gordon as well. But Grayson Allen's actually shone brighter than Eric Gordon, which has been somewhat surprising, but also very nice to have him on your roster.
It is a little bit surprising because early on, when Bradley Beal was injured, we saw the reverse, where Eric Gordon was a more valuable stream. But I think here I totally agree with you, where it's Allen. Over the past few games, Gordon's really just been struggling.
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely. Now, a couple of big guys here. Isaiah Hartenstein, he should have been rostered a couple of weeks ago when Mitchell Robinson went down. Jericho Sims is also out now. So you've got Isaiah Hartenstein dominating at this stage. So when he's not in foul trouble, he's just dominating the boards. He's not getting a lot of points, but you don't really expect that out of him. But sneaky assists as well, and the blocks and the rebounds are very, very appreciated. Now, Nick Richards, again, taking advantage of an injury, and that's Mark Williams being sidelined. He's just been listed as doubtful game after game after game, and I think he's missed at least 3, possibly even 4. It's looking like he'll continue to miss. So in that case, Nick Richards needs to be rostered, whilst Mark Williams is sidelined.
Yeah, and I think here though Isaiah is the more reliable long-term stream. We're not really sure when Williams will return. I'm hoping it's soon because I have him, but in the moment, Richards is also a good ad.
Yeah, he's doing really well. He didn't start today, but he did really well. So he's got to be rostered. Karis LeVert, I think he missed the last one, but the reason why he's an ad is just because Darius Garland is out, and Karis LeVert will take advantage of that. So if he does happen to be unrostered at this stage, please make sure that he is rostered after this show, of course. Alex Caruso, we know that he's had health issues. He can't stay healthy. He can't stay on the court. But when he does, he has to be rostered just for those elite steals. And this is probably more for category leagues, Kayla, but I think he could still provide a little bit of value in points leagues.
Slightly. I was looking at his stats. He could give you about 20, 25 fantasy points per game, which is actually pretty good for a streamer too. But you always also got to monitor the situation with Zach LaVine. He's not as valuable when he's sharing the court with him.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a few guys taking advantage whilst Zach LaVine is sidelined. But yeah, for the time being, I think in categories, Alex Caruso should be rostered. Kelly Oubre, I think this is a real short-term one. Come this time next week or even this weekend, he'll probably be on our drops list. But while Joel Embiid is going to be sidelined, I think he's going to miss the next game as well. Kelly Oubre needs to be rostered. He will provide those points, somewhat empty stats, but he will provide you enough points and usage to be able to be roster worthy.
Yeah, we already saw that last game too, but the issue is when Joel Embiid returns, that front court is so crowded that he just can't get those minutes and make the same impact that he had before that injury.
Yeah, he doesn't do enough across the board for him to be valuable once when Embiid returns to that lineup. So yeah, he'll be a quick drop, but again, like we said, as Embiid is sidelined, Oubre needs to be rostered. We've got Jaden Ivey. He's looked really good. Quite a game last night, but I still think he has to be rostered. He's getting the minutes. It's looking obviously like a lost cause in Detroit, but I think they're going to play him. They're going to play him big minutes as well, and he's providing enough value for him to be rostered, even through some of those quieter games like last night.
Yeah, and Killian Hayes has been out too, so hopefully that's a trend that continues. But it's also just the issue that their lineup fluctuates from game to game. So it's definitely a monitor situation too, but you have to capitalize on it while he's doing well and receiving those minutes.
Big time, big time. Tari Eason, he's a favorite of a lot of people in the fantasy community, but now he's showing out. He misses a couple of games here and there, but he was coming back from injury. But Tari Eason, I think you have to roster him. You just know the upside with him. And Dylan Brooks is now injured as well, so that'll open up a little bit more playing time for a few others in the rotation. That'll allow him to stay on the court for a little bit longer. So you know that he's a per minute monster. And when he does get those bigger minutes, he's providing big lines as well. So Tari Eason, for me, a big ad.
Yeah, same with me too. Unfortunately, someone took him off my waiver wires in both of my leagues, but definitely keep an eye out for him if he's available and get him while you can.
Yep. Next one, speculative ad. He's not a must ad guy, but Craig Porter, he's providing some value again with Darius Garland sidelined. Donovan Mitchell has been out with illness, so he could be a real short-term play. But again, similar to Kelly Oubre Jr., he could be on this drops list come next episode. I'll move on to Colin Sexton in Utah. So he's looked really good. He remained as a starter in the last game. Taylor Horton-Tucker didn't even make the rotation. So that's something to monitor. I think he will be in our drops list on the next segment. But that's good news for Colin Sexton. Obviously, good news for Jordan Clarkson. Keontae George also came off the bench today. I'm not sure if that's going to continue. But while they've got this rotation in play, Colin Sexton has to be had on your roster.
100%. And it's almost similar to the Pistons where the lineup kind of fluctuates here and there. So it's another monitoring situation, but hopefully Sexton can turn it around.
Yeah. And he's quite low on this list just because we know that he does get you a lot of points, but he doesn't get you much else. And even in his prime when he was at the at the Cleveland Cavaliers, he really struggled to really easily break into that top 80. He was always perennially around that top 100 category league ranking. So now he's got an opportunity here. I'm not going to say he's going to be a top 50 guy because we've never seen it before, and I don't expect him to do it now just all of a sudden. But I still think he's going to be a nice back end roster guy. Derek Lively, I've got him here. He's only 65% rostered. That's got to be closer to 100% because, particularly in category leagues, he's been awesome. Like, really, really good. He has to be rostered in category leagues. And maybe that 65% is a lot of points leagues that don't value it as much as we do in category leagues.
Yeah, I have a feeling that's the case, which is a bit surprising because he has been pretty valuable in points leagues too. But I think a lot of people also panicked and dropped him when he got injured. But
Hmm.
hopefully that's a trend that turns around.
Yeah, big time. Make sure he is rostered. Now, I've got a few Dallas guys here: Dante Exum, Derek Jones Jr., and Tim Hardaway Jr. Um, just with Kyrie still sidelined, I think these guys, particularly Dante Exum,
Mhm.
Jason Kidd came out and said even when Kyrie returns, they're going to play a three-guard lineup with Dante Exum starting alongside of Kyrie and Luka, which is great. Doesn't mean he's going to get a whole lot of usage, but his game is not predicated on high usage as well. So I think he's a nice add. Derek Jones Jr., again, he's providing some value, particularly while Kyrie is out. When Kyrie returns, I think Derek Jones Jr. will be a drop. And Tim Hardaway, he's always nice for threes and points, but again, similar to Colin Sexton, he doesn't provide much else in terms of category leagues. He's probably a little bit more valuable in points leagues, Kayla.
He is just a bit, but he tends to always come on and off the waiver wire as well. But I think here, honestly, Exum is the most valuable long-term streamer.
Yeah. And it was, yeah, good to hear from Jason Kidd that that's
Mhm.
what he's going to do. And of course, we know that Jason Kidd can really change that up pretty quickly. He's sometimes quite inconsistent with his messaging and what he does during games. But we move on. Dayron Sharp, this is, again, not a must add situation, but he's looked really good. He's obviously backing up Nick Claxton at the Nets, but he's putting up really good numbers at the moment, providing traditional big man stats, but sometimes that is really hard to find on the waiver wire. So make full advantage. He's playing again today. So I think he has to be had at least as a stream.
Yeah, I think he's a little bit risky. I was even a little bit hesitant to pick him up, but I think he's worth a shot, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Could be short term, but at
Mhm.
least for the, quieter slate going into today. Now, in contrast, the drops, we spoke about this, but Taylor Horton Tucker was out of the rotation, so I think he's an easy drop right now, which is disappointing. A week ago, he was really firing, really, really putting up great numbers. Same goes for Chris Dunn. So these guys were running the show while there were a few injuries in the backcourt. But now that everyone seems to be healthy, it's a full roster now to choose from. These guys just aren't worth rostering in standard leagues.
Yeah, maybe even like possibly in deeper leagues for THT. But I think they will come around again because they're going to experience injuries, and we've already seen what they can do. So it's very promising there.
Yeah, just be ready to pick them up again when they do change that rotation, which is probably likely. It's not looking great for Utah at this stage. They may blow it up, as we've alluded to in previous episodes. Patrick Williams, he was a must-add guy a couple of weeks ago, but again, he's had a bit of a quieter week or so. So I think he's a safe drop. He's a nice luxury stash. I know a lot of the Bulls fans have a lot of faith in him. The Bulls organization have a lot of faith in him. He was a high draft pick, but it just doesn't necessarily translate to fantasy stats all the time. He just teases us, and we bring him onto our roster, and then we'll drop him just because he's having these quieter games. But I don't think he has to be rostered. He's not necessarily a drop, but he's a candidate if a hotter free agent comes available.
Yeah, I agree with you there too. And even with that rough start to the season, I think a lot of people are also very hesitant to add him until he started really just popping off. But I think that's soon going to change, like you alluded to.
Yeah, and he actually had really low minutes today, and maybe
Mhm.
that was just because Andre Drummond was so dominant. I know they came and had Patrick Williams play backup five for a little bit today, which I don't think it really suits him. Doesn't yeah, they just played a lot of Drummond, so yeah, he didn't play very much today. But hopefully that changes moving forward. But yeah, watch this space. Asar Thompson, it pains for me to have him on this list, but we know the upside. We know that if he gets the opportunity, he has to be rostered, but he's just not getting that opportunity.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this in an earlier episode too. But for me, he was a hold but I actually just dropped him yesterday and no regrets. But I think that you could safely drop him and you could still expect him to be there on the waiver wire to pick him up if needed because like we said, we don't really know what's going to happen with that Pistons lineup.
Yeah, and that's a good way to think about it. If you're hesitant about dropping someone, I guess you need to know your league, and if you think that he'll be picked up straight away, maybe it's
Mhm.
something to think about that maybe you retain their services for the time being. But if you're confident that they'll go into the waiver wire and you can pick them up quick, smart after a real hot game, then perhaps it's an okay time to drop them as well, just to get that streaming value as well. But yeah, it really depends on your league. Now, Gordon Hayward, calf strain. He's an older player. He's always injury prone. He's often sidelined. And again, it's come to this. He's probably only going to be out for another week, but that also aligns with when LaMelo Ball could also return. So when LaMelo Ball does return, even if Gordon Hayward is healthy, I don't think he is a must roster player in standard leagues.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of Hornets who are also gonna suffer from LaMelo's return too. So Hayward is definitely one of the most top of the list drops. Even PJ Washington could be considered for that too, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I think so. Definitely PJ Washington, and maybe even Brandon Miller as well.
Mhm.
But yeah, you want to have a little bit more faith in your rookie. But yeah, Gordon Hayward for me is a drop. Again, if you've got the ability to stash him in an IL or an IR, you can do that and see what happens once Ball does return. But if they are full, your IR slots are full, then I think he is an okay drop at this stage. Santi Aldama, again, just not getting the minutes at this stage. So I think that's an easy drop. We won't spend too much time on that. Norman Powell, Kawhi missed again last night, but Norman Powell just didn't really have the greatest game. And you know that he's quite limited in what he can provide as well. He's good for points. He's okay for steals, good for free throws. But apart from that, he's not getting you much else.
Yeah, I think he's a little bit more value in points leagues, but still he's more of a streamer than an actual hold. And
Mm.
even when like you said, when there's injuries, he's still very inconsistent.
Yeah, and he'll pop off and you'll feel bad because he won't be on your roster and he was previously and he'll pop off for 25 points. But again, that's just the nature of the beast with Norman Powell. But I don't think he's going to be consistent enough for you to have to roster him every single time.
Mhm.
Herb Jones, this is a tough one, particularly in category leagues. I get it in points leagues, category leagues. He's really dropped off, and it was crazy. Just he was awesome. He was a top 50, cleared top 50 player at the start of the season, and Trey Murphy coming back hasn't helped the situation. Just he hasn't had the same opportunity. He's not getting the same stocks. Get to the point where now you'd consider dropping him in a category league and probably an easy drop in a points league.
Yeah, definitely have to agree with you there. I don't think that anyone would really rush to go grab him off the waivers unless he records like a really good game.
Yeah, it is disappointing after such a great start. And again, similar to Asar Thompson, you know what he can do when given the opportunity. He's got that defensive mindset that does translate nicely to fantasy value, but just not given the opportunity at this stage. Naz Reid, he was looking really nice, just coming off the bench behind the twin towers of Cat and Gobert, but he's cooled off. And I think he's a safe drop at this stage. And when he heats up again, maybe that's another opportunity to pick him up. But yeah, I don't think you need to roster him.
Yeah, I was gonna say the
Obi,
exact same thing.
yeah, no need to roster him at this stage. Obi Toppin, he's lost his starting um, role today. Went to Jalen Smith at power forward, which is interesting in itself. And I didn't put Jalen Smith on the ads just because it's one game and I'm not sure where it's going to go for the Pacers. But Obi Toppin, very limited minutes. And we know that his stat set isn't always that conducive to fantasy value, even when he's getting high minutes as well. So I think he can be dropped in standard leagues. Kevin Herter, I think I've talked about him a fair bit in terms of not necessarily having to hold him. He's just so inconsistent, and I guess you get that with the Kings. It's Fox, it's a bonus, and sometimes it's some of the other guys. Keegan Murray pops off every now and then, but again, he had another a bit of a stinker overnight.
Yeah, he's a more valuable streamer when you know that Fox is gonna be out.
Mhm.
But when they're fully healthy, he could still pop off, but it's very unpredictable and inconsistent.
Yeah, I'll put him in a similar boat as Harrison Barnes. Just,
Mhm.
you can roster him. They're not gonna blow you away, but they're gonna be solid at times. But then I just don't think you need to roster him. DeAndre Hunter, he's going to be out for at least 2 weeks, reevaluated in 2 weeks, which is good news for Sadiq Bey. Jalen Johnson returned last night, which is awesome, and I got very, very excited to see him back on the court. But DeAndre Hunter, I think he's going to be out for at least 2 weeks, as I said, so I don't think you need to roster him, and I don't even think you need to burn an IR slot, really.
Yeah, definitely not a hold. And I even talked about this earlier. The only the only hawk I would really hold right now would be Bay. But even then, like with Johnson back, it doesn't make sense to have either of them unless you're in a really deep league.
Yeah, yeah. I much prefer Bay anyway.
Yes.
When Jalen Johnson was sidelined, it was Bay first and then Hunter second. Hunter had a lot of nice games as well, but again, very inconsistent. So now that he's injured, I think he's an easy drop. Your boy Wiggins, I'll let you talk about Andrew Wiggins.
Yeah, Wiggins, this is the same thing. He'll pop off for that one night and then people get really excited and then they add him and
Mm,
then it's just like he goes to crap and that's
yep,
it. And I think that's all to say about him. He's definitely not worth an ad and I think the only reason that people hold him is because of his name.
I think so. Name value. And it
Mhm.
happens in my leagues as well. It's just they're holding on to him and you wonder why they are because you're
Mhm.
just looking at the numbers, but it's purely name value in this sense. But yeah, crazy one. That's a drop for me. Kyle Lowry, you got Tyler Hero returning, so that absolutely limits what Kyle Lowry can do.
Yeah, definitely. And he's a little bit older too and those injury concerns and he's also very inconsistent. There's no really use for him to hold him.
Yeah, except for deeper leagues, as we've talked about with a few
Yes.
of these other guys. Trey Jones, just he hasn't put together the season that we were hoping for. He's lost that starting point guard role. He lost that very, very early in the season, and he hasn't retained it or regained it at this stage. But it's very, very disappointing because we know that he can provide really nice guard stats, but he just will not get enough minutes to be valuable enough.
Yeah, and I think that's the main issue. He's just not being utilized properly right now, and his real life and fantasy impact is suffering as a result of that.
Yeah, and I think Pop's putting a lot of stock into Jeremy Sohan, which is
Mhm.
fine. I don't think he's the point guard of the future, and neither is Trey Jones. But it would be nice to see a real elite. Not that he's elite, but a nice traditional point guard to play alongside of Wemby, but not at this stage. Ben Simmons, again, we don't know what's happening with his back. Um, we're thinking maybe 2 weeks, but again, it could be 2 weeks, it could be three, it could just linger. And he's had back concerns. We've talked about it in the past. I just don't think he has to be rostered. And again, I don't think you have to burn an IR slot just because there's so many guys coming in and out of injury, and there's so much uncertainty around Big Ben. I just don't think you need to roster him.
I think though in points leagues he holds a little bit more value. I would say though if you're in a shallow league, probably worth a drop, but in deeper, if you have that open IL spot, then I would keep him there and then
Yeah.
kind of monitor as his injury progresses.
Yeah, fair call. Fair call. And finally, I've got three big men from the Magic: Wendell Carter Jr., Goga Badatse, and Mo Wagner. Wendell Carter Jr. had come back over the last week or so. He's looked, he's just looked mid. He hasn't looked really good at all. I don't think he has to be rostered. And that also makes Mo Wagner and Goga Badatse drops as well. Just the way that they're playing all three of these guys at times is just it's not providing enough value for one of those to really stand out from the rest.
Yeah, exactly. And if you really had to keep one, I would say Carter Jr. But even then, I haven't been one of my teams, and it's he's just really been disappointing. And even before he got injured too, he wasn't producing what we expected.
Yeah.
So he's a safe drop. But if you had to keep him in a deeper league, then I would.
Yeah, I understand holding him. You look at his game, it looks nice. You feel like it should produce a lot better fantasy output, but we've seen it for many, many seasons now. He'll look nice one game and then just really be mediocre for a lot of the other games as well.
Mhm.
So, yeah, disappointing, but I think he's a drop. Just some notable injuries. Donovan Mitchell, he's been out with illness, but I think he'll be coming back very, very shortly. Joel Embiid, as we said, that I think he'll miss the next game as well, which opens up the door for um, Paul Reed.
Mhm.
But he did put in a stinker the last time Embiid um, did play. Missed. And also Mobamba as well. So he put in a great performance. So that's a bit of a tough one to actually work out who's going to play the good game. But I know Paul Reed actually had a lot of foul trouble in the last one, so he may be a decent stream for the next one that Embiid does miss. But watch this space, and I don't think Embiid will miss much more time. Mark Williams constantly being listed as doubtful. We don't really know what's going on here, but I'm hoping that he'll be back shortly. But again, that's just guessing at this stage. We don't know what the Hornets' plans are, and they're just listing him as doubtful pretty much every single game. But let's hope that he does return soon. Kyrie Irving, again, he should be back very soon. I've got him down as being back within the week, but again, that could extend out beyond that. But let's wait and see. But that'll change the dynamic. I've got Brooklyn there, so that's Dallas. That's a typo there. But yeah, that'll change the dynamic in Dallas as well. Markelle Fultz, he's about a week away, but I think we say that, and we have said that over the last month. He's about a week away. I just don't know if I want to roster him, even when he does return, because he'll have these rest days. He'll have limited minutes. It'll take him quite a time to ramp up. I just don't think it's worth the hassle at this stage to roster him, but it is nice just to see him coming back and being healthy as well. It's good to see his and hear his story, but in terms of fantasy, I don't think you need to roster him. We spoke about Gordon Hayward. Yeah, about a week. Old man as well, but calf strain, about a week. But again, like we said, I don't think you need to roster him once LaMelo Ball is back. But let's wait and see. Maybe the dynamic is completely different when he does return, and LaMelo does return as well. But I've got LaMelo listed there about a week. So their timelines are quite similar. Dylan Brooks, this is a new injury, a oblique strain. So that'll probably take him out for 1 to 2 weeks, which again opens up the door for more minutes for guys like even Amen Thompson, Tari Eason, perhaps even Cam Whitmore may get more of a run as well. So that does open up the door for some of the younger guys as well. So watch this space, but I'm hoping that Tari Eason does take full advantage of that. Nikola Vucevic, we spoke about him, so he could be out for about a week. So make sure that Andre Drummond is rostered. Bradley Beal, again, very, very disappointing season, but hopefully around 2 weeks only that he'll miss. Ben Simmons, we spoke about, hopefully around 2 weeks, but again, very, very iffy around that timeline. Now, Zach LaVine, I hear that there is some developments. Hopefully he's back soon. But again, there's a lot of contention around his future at the Bulls as well.
Yeah, I think that the Bulls are really just a team to keep an eye on at the trade deadline. We really don't know what's going to happen, whether they're going to stick with it or just blow it up.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, a lot of guys taking advantage whilst he's been sidelined. Obviously, Kobe White's one of our favorites. We haven't mentioned him until then, which has been hard for me because I love him. But Zach LaVine, yeah, he should be around 2 weeks until his return. And at that point, we'll see what happens in terms of his future with the Bulls. Hunter, we spoke about around 2 weeks minimum. So that's reevaluation in 2 weeks. Darius Garland, now that's optimistic around 3 weeks from now, but that could push out a little bit further. But with that jaw injury, it could see him sidelined for about a month. But let's hope that he does get back on court shortly. Evan Mobley, now this is really disappointing. A lot of people were looking for him to become a real top 30 type of player this season. He was looking really fantastic, but about another month away, which is disappointing. There's no real clear ad in his absence. But yeah, Mobley out for about another month, which, yeah, disappointing for those that put a lot of stock into his value this season. And finally, Mitchell Robinson, it came out that firstly it would miss 8 to 10 weeks, and then it came out that he's had ankle surgery. So that's going to rule him out for the rest of the season, again, helping the cause of Isaiah Hartenstein. That was it. Notable injuries. Yeah.
Let's get into the schedule.
Take it away.
All right. So for week 11, the good news is that every team will be playing at least 3 games. So there's no one with 2. I won't mention all the teams playing 4, but that'll be 20 of them. And then we have 10 teams with 3 games. And then there's also a couple of back-to-backs of note. So for the Celtics, Friday, Saturday, it's important to look at Porzingis and Horford. Horford will probably miss one of those back-to-backs as he's a little bit older and he usually does that anyway. We also have the Hornets on Monday and Tuesday. Mark Williams is another player to keep an eye on. We really don't know if he's going to return. He's just being listed as doubtful every game, which isn't very promising considering that they also haven't really given us a timeline. But in that time, Richards is someone that you should be streaming. And we also have the Bucks on Wednesday and Thursday. Any thoughts?
Yeah, just with the Bucks, obviously Chris Middleton, he's probably going to sit one of those
Yep.
back-to-back games, and maybe even Giannis. We'll see. He has played a few back-to-backs, but again, a bit of a rest for the big man wouldn't go astray, and it's almost expected at this stage. All right,
That's everything.
that's
That's
a
the
wrap.
show.
Thank you, Kayla. Any final thoughts?
I think the biggest thing is just keeping an eye on the injuries right now. We don't really have a lot of timelines that are being reported, so hopefully that's something that develops over the coming weeks, and then just make adjustments to your team as needed.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Give us your Twitter handle, Kayla.
Yeah, Kayla_Fonte.
Fantastic. And obviously, you'll find me at NBA Fantasy Bible on Twitter. Also got a Facebook page, but a lot of our work is done on Twitter. So keep an eye out for that. Keep an eye out for our updates on Twitter. And of course, subscribe and like on our YouTube channel as well. But thank you very much, Kayla.
Thank you.
Thanks again. And we'll catch up very shortly. Thank you, guys. See ya.